Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 82 of the Citrix session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I think I missed last week, so it's good to be back. Bill Sutton's with me. Bill, Director of Services at XenTegra. Bill, how's it going?
Going well, Andy.
We were just chit-chatting with Paul a little bit before this, and just to kind of give our listeners who may not have listened to maybe episode 1 at this point, you've been touching and working with Citrix technologies since what year?
Me?
Yeah.
Paul.
How long?
You first, Bill.
Me, 1998.
1998. So, and I say this all the time to people and people like you. Do you remember the first time you saw a seamless hosted application launch?
I do.
And do you remember how it made you feel as far as technologist, game changer type thing?
Absolutely. Yep. I thought there's so many applications for this and so many ways we can leverage this in various customers that I was all in.
Yeah. It's just kind of a no brainer. And then the security and the network and everything else that's come along with it has just been icing on the cake, really.
Yep, exactly.
So we got Paul Carley with me, with us. Paul, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So Paul, tell us a little about where you're located and what your role at Citrix is.
Yeah, sure. I'm down in our headquarters here in Fort Lauderdale. I am a product marketing manager for our Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops team. Focus on various parts of that overall, but I've been here since 2011. I can't believe it's been 10 years as of this month. So it's my anniversary month, July, and just came off vacation. So I'm rested and ready, hopefully, for you guys to ask me a whole bunch of questions, and we'll see how it goes.
We'll make it easy. We'll just go through the blog and cover what's there. And if people want to know more, we can definitely chat with them afterwards. Did you move to Fort Lauderdale for the job, or did you already live there?
No, I lived here. I worked for a previous organization that had a big M. It was a phone manufacturer for about 12 years prior to that. So I was already down here in Fort Lauderdale. So been here for over 20 years. It's probably my home, but yeah, I'm getting used to it and loving it. I like to go back up north for vacations now and again, so get away from the heat, but otherwise it's good.
Yeah, I have aspirations of living down in that area at some point, a few months out of the year at some point. We'll see if life ever makes that happen or not.
Yeah, you and a lot of other people, man, it's grown. We're growing even since the pandemic. We've grown exponentially, people and so forth. So yeah, I think a lot of people have the same idea.
Yeah.
And technology and work is now enabling that. I just had a brief kind of pseudo interview with a guy that he pretty much wasn't interested. He likes us, but he's got a good job now. And I threw out the idea, well, would you like to live anywhere other than you live now? And he said, well, yeah, I'd love to live in Spain or Portugal or something like that. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. I mean, that's what we do, right? We enable that type of we enable that type of workforce and hopefully make it seamless and a positive experience. That's what Bill and myself and you to the last 10 years that's all we've been talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I've had, since the pandemic, we've had several of my coworkers and friends have said, well, since, as long as I'm getting my work done, I can basically work from anywhere. So a buddy of mine just went to Colorado for a month and did a month of work there, got a nice Airbnb, quiet. And it was, it was great. He was able to get his work done. Another coworker of mine just was city hopping to visit friends that they hadn't seen since before the pandemic. Right. And they continue to work right through it. So yeah, we're seeing that more and more today. And that's the thing what Citrix is focused on is making that happen for customers and for employees that want to kind of have that lifestyle, but still get their work done, right?
Well, that's actually one of my, as a business owner, that's one of my things. I want to have a couple places, condos, if you will, in different parts of the country where I could say, hey, part of your benefit of working here is once a quarter, you can use any condo you want for a week and then, go work from there, take your family, enjoy that area, do something different. I think that's a big part of the balance, the hybrid work life that should be happening.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the, I don't like to say blessing, but that's one of the things that's come out of the pandemic is, people have seen that they've been able to, go, a lot of people are reevaluating their life and saying, hey, I'm going to go work wherever. I'm going to go someplace. That's like the guy you're saying there, he wants to go work in another country for a while. I think this remote work, thought now is becoming a reality, which is making companies like yourselves and Citrix, interesting, and we're getting customers we've never talked to before that have, kind of want to have that experience or have their employees have that experience.
Right. Yeah. Now's the time, especially if you're a forward-thinking employer. That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's jump into the blog. As you and Bill and I were
Certainly.
discussing before this, there's a ton of content here, and this is some of the most tangible stuff we cover on the podcast is the kind of the specifics around what you guys are doing. So, I think what we were just talking about ties into the introduction here that a lot of organizations across the world are looking to provide a flexible work from anywhere type of approach, and that's where you guys just keep doubling down on the technology, right?
Yeah, that's true. We're seeing, as I mentioned before, seeing a lot of companies that are coming out of the pandemic here, or in this next phase, I'll say, of the pandemic, where they want to leverage this flexible work where they can have their employees work part-time at home or part-time on the road, or just give that flexibility to allow them to work wherever they need to. And that's where Citrix has been dedicated to trying to make that happen for customers. Where in the pandemic, in the beginning, we're seeing a lot of companies had to quickly move to bring their employees, safely home. And we're glad that was able to happen thanks to technology and quick thinkers and good business companies. But we're also seeing now that companies have gone through that, they're saying, okay, now that we're in this next phase of this next gen, we're seeing, how do I make sure that if those employees want to stay and do this flexible kind of work style, how do I make sure that it's secure? How do I make sure that it's a great performance, whether they're in the office or at home? And just making sure that everything works properly and that my employees are staying productive. So that's where our focus is from Citrix, is making sure that we continue to add features and flexibility to make sure that no matter where their employee is leveraging their work from, what kind of device they're on, that they're doing it securely and they're getting a great experience. Make sure they're productive. So that's where as we continue to add features and services to both our on-prem and our cloud services, that's our focus.
Yeah. Well, let me take one step back here. This came out a few weeks ago. It's the official title, if people are looking for it, is What's New with Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, June 2021. And Paul, I'll ask that if there's pieces of this that are service related, but not on premises or vice versa, that you just call that out just for our listeners so that they understand when one applies and the other. And specifically, we're talking about Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop 7, release 2106, 21 being the year and 06 being the month. I guess one quick conversation for you is, Microsoft said Windows 10 was the last one. You guys have been on 7 for quite a while. Is there an 8 coming someday, or does it even matter at this point?
I don't know if it matters too much. When we did, I think it was 2017, and correct me if I'm wrong, 2018, around that time, we switched to a dedicated, this change of numbering, we put the year and the month for when it's released. We just specify 7 right now because of the, to just differentiate between on-prem and in the cloud kind of services. But don't know if we'll ever change that. But you know what? I've been here 10 years and we've made a couple of name changes, as you guys are probably very familiar with XenApps and Desktops. You guys could render off probably 7 or 8 different versions that we've come up with. So are we ever going to change that? I wouldn't be a betting man and say, yeah, sure, never gonna change that. But I don't know of anything right now that's going to happen like that. I think we're more focused on getting those features out there so you and the customers can take advantage of those things today. Yeah. But you never know.
Well, I think you just said something I found very interesting. And now as I'm scanning back through the article, I'm noticing this. So when the number is included, so in this case, 7, so Citrix Virtual App and Desktop 7, that's a key indicator that for people that are on top of their game, that means we're talking about the on-premises piece of the equation. Is that true?
That is correct. Yes. And then we usually like to call out from our Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops version, the family that's in the cloud, we like to call that our cloud service. So you'll see that as well as called, Citrix Apps and Desktops Cloud Service, or Citrix Apps. A lot of people will reference it as CVAD service. That's when you want to that's the clue that's our cloud services. But again, we're trying to make sure that we're giving both, but I'll call it out as you suggested. I'll call out where we have it. But if you could see in the blog here, or if you're referencing the blog when you go to it, we start right off at the top and work from the on-prem version 7 right down into the other services together.
But
I
to
think
be
that's
clear,
great.
the service doesn't include that 2106. The service is always evergreen or always up to date, right? Pretty much.
Very good. That's right, Bill. That's one of the key advantages to the cloud service is
Right.
that Citrix brings all the enhancements and automatically imports them and puts them in there for you. So less on admins to have to continually update their service and make sure they have the latest patches and updates and features. So that's the great advantage. One of the big advantages of going to cloud service. Obviously, the other is being able to do on-prem and cloud together as a hybrid mode. So but yeah, this is for, again, we still love our on-prem customers. We still want to service them and support them as long as they need to. So this is, definitely, as you can see here, features that we continue to add quarterly to the service to continue to enhance it.
Well, let's do that then. Let's jump through
Sure.
the on-premises pieces, which would be for 7/2106, and we'll start. And somebody literally the other day, somewhat of a non-technical person, said 2022 to me as if I was supposed to know what that meant. And what they were saying was Windows Server 2022, and you guys are announcing at least public preview for virtual app and desktop, both the control plane and the VDA, I assume, but you can clarify that for Windows Server, Microsoft Windows Server 2022.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, so Microsoft back in March announced that they did a public preview start for Windows Server 2022. With Windows Server 2022, they're adding some enhancements, including some security, some platform updates, just kind of making it, again, conscious of customers that are looking at cloud services as well as on-prem, the capabilities of being able to support both and be able to do it securely. So Citrix, as you guys are well know, we've been partners with them, or been partnering with them for close to 30 years here, plus years. So it's not surprising that when Microsoft comes out with a new service that we're supporting them, we try to do it as quickly as possible. Oftentimes we try to get it as a day one support. In this case, Microsoft is rolling out this Windows Server 2022, and it's in a current public preview. You can go out today and start looking at it and start testing it if you want. Citrix is, of course, as we're out there to support our customers, we're giving support to that public preview version now. So if you have this virtual apps and desktops 2106, you have the capability of being able to go start testing that service as well. Now we anticipate that Windows Server will probably go into full GA sometime in the second half here of 2021. Got to remember my dates. And once it does, we'll have support for that once it reaches general availability as well.
And Paul, and it's okay if you don't know the answer to this. I don't know if I'd expect you to know the answer to this. Is there any type of RDS related functionality in Server 2022 that elevates the Citrix world? Is there a feature in there we should be excited about?
Not that I know of at this time. I'm not an expert on Windows Server 22. Honestly, I just haven't had enough time to dive into the details. I do know that there are some security enhancements that Microsoft is adding to it as we know in the world today, we're seeing a lot of malware, a lot of things like that, and breaches and approaches. So I know Microsoft is very conscious of those things, and they're trying to implement additional security features just on top of to enhance what they're doing today. From a Citrix perspective, I don't know. You should be able to determine, or as a Citrix admin, you should be able to roll into those and deploy on those servers without any issues, as I understand at this time. There aren't any unique ones that have been called out to me or that I understand right now at this time. But as we get closer to launch to general availability, we'll probably have an announcement, a blog, or some kind of layout here where we'll kind of go into details of what kind of support you're going to get and what kind of enhancements with Citrix you're going to have there.
Yeah,
I can almost guarantee it. Yeah.
Bill, you're not aware of any, are you? Do you?
No.
Okay. You saw the one I just binged.
Yeah.
the one where you could steal an admin hash just if you're on the box somewhere. I don't know that that's real, but security guys like to talk about that one all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, let's talk about the next one. Single session VDA install and upgrade, restore and install upgrade failure. This looks like some housekeeping. What's this one?
Yeah, it's more about, as you said, it's more about housekeeping. In some instances where customers are going in and want to do a fresh VDA install, if they're taking everything out, in some instances that they don't get everything out, they might have a fail over, or they're, and sometimes in installation, if they're not doing it, they miss a step, or in some instances, what we're doing is we're giving this feature that they can enable that allows them to instantly roll back to a previous VDA install if that upgrade fails. It's more kind of just a safety measure and make sure that the admin doesn't have to struggle if he has some kind of mistake or failure on an upgrade. It instantly will roll back so that he's not having to go back and do all that extra legwork. So it's more of a maintenance thing. It's more of a convenience for the admin. But again, our goals are to make, we're trying to make the admin's life a little bit easier and give him or her, the opportunity to, be able to keep their updates, do their maintenance without having a lot of extra headaches, which we're all appreciative, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to get Bill's take on this next one. Single session reconnect. So take out the word single. I shouldn't have said that. Session reconnect after disconnected from a machine in maintenance mode. So in other words, you put a machine in maintenance mode, you're using it, you disconnect to it, either intentionally or unintentionally, allowing that user to reconnect to it, controlling whether that can or can't happen. Bill, is this something you've ever run into in the field?
Not really. I was kind of curious as to what the driving force was behind it, but I can see the point. You've got particularly for users, on a Wi-Fi network or something, and you put a machine in maintenance mode and they get disconnected and they're unable to reconnect to finish their work. But, I wonder here what drove this, because this could make it difficult to trickle users off of a server or off of VDA. I'm
Bill,
sure.
think about a company in the world of Citrix and every other technology company. It only takes one big company that has this problem that's reoccurring for them to want to request this. So Paul, is this saying you can control it one way or the other, whether it can or cannot reconnect?
Yeah, that's correct. And I believe he's correct that it was a customer request. I don't have all the details there, but that's oftentimes a lot of our priorities on upgrades and service enhancements, or whatever you want to call them. They come from customers direct. That's what we try to prioritize, because obviously our customers are important to us, and we want to kind of make sure that they're happy. So yeah.
Do either of you guys know what the default behavior currently is?
You can't reconnect.
Can't reconnect.
Yeah,
correct.
You would think you'd want, unless you're customers Bank of America and they want it, and then all of a sudden maybe you want. All right. Remote PC access disconnect session timer. I think I know what this is all about, and always found it interesting. It was managed at the Microsoft level. Bill, explain what this is, and then Paul, jump in and say what you've done.
Yeah, I think what this is, based on reading it, is really just handling what happens when a session expires. So in a traditional virtual desktop instance, if you disconnect from a session or log off from that session hangs there for a little while, and then it can reboot depending on your settings. Looks like they're bringing that similar functionality to the remote PC world, where if users disconnected, then it logs them off after a certain amount of time.
Well, and Bill, I totally screwed that up. Let's make sure for our listeners, we're talking about remote PC, where you remote into your physical or virtual,
Correct.
but more like a physical desktop,
Right.
Either a Blade PC or the PC at your desk. And this is bringing some of that niceness to that world. Is that what this is saying?
Yeah, I think so. You know how in a traditional, VDI environment, if you disconnect from your workstation or from your VDA, your virtual desktop, and you don't do anything for a certain amount of time, it'll log you off to free up the compute and memory and all of that. It looks like they're bringing that to the remote PC world, so that the desktop is not just hanging out there with a disconnected state. It'll actually log you off. Obviously, for these types of things where you're logging off a disconnected user, you want to make sure it's communicated properly to your users, so that they don't leave open a 50-page Word document that they haven't saved, and you just log them off without saving it. That doesn't make for a happy user. So you have to make sure that's communicated.
So Paul, Bill's usually a pretty smart guy. Did you get it right?
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, I would add the one little piece of it is that this is good for, especially in pooled environments where you have a bunch of pooled remote PC or desktops or whatever you want to call them, virtual, in the sense that they're not, if you have only a certain volume that you're holding open or you want to keep them available, I'm assuming things like education labs and things like that, where, if the person disconnects but forgets to shut down, or maybe they've accidentally disconnected after a certain time, we want to get that back out into a pooled availability to make sure that they can get back in and get access to it.
Yeah, I'm Googling now, Binging, as you can see, and I love the Blade PC concept. When people tell me virtual desktops don't have enough horsepower, they don't realize that we're not talking about virtualizing the actual machine. In most cases, we are. We're talking about virtualizing the delivery of it. High-powered Blade PCs, that'll get the job done. I don't care who you are.
Yeah. And remote PC is a great way for customers who are looking at virtualization to get started too. That's one other option. Very easy to quickly to get to put, to get it up and running. A lot of customers are seeing that as an advantage, especially coming in and out of the pandemic. They were looking at that as a quick way to do it, and it's great option for those who aren't familiar with remote PC.
Yeah, and anything's buying people a bunch of high-powered laptops and sending them out there where they become a security vulnerability.
Yeah, and plus, I think when the pandemic happened, because there was so much demand for PCs and hardware that those options were becoming harder and harder to come by. So yeah, that's customers were looking at that.
All right, so one of our favorite topics, what we call, currently call it session recording. Bill, what did we call it in the beginning?
Smart auditor.
Smart auditor.
Smart auditor. Yeah.
Session recording. Paul, what are you guys announcing here around session recording as it relates to the on-premises story?
We've just we're just enhancing it a little bit more. So we want to including in some instances some of the client drive mapping to be able to have that is in being able to record any information regarding anything that's happening there, as well as with session recording. We've done an enhancement here also that will let you set, it keeps a record of events only, so that when you go to, instead of getting this full recorded session of an entire user's session, or maybe it's a shift that somebody's on, rather than record this entire huge file, you can set things like events and record them at certain points rather than record the entire session. So if you need to go back and look at something, you can quickly access it and see exactly what the event that took place. And when we say events, those can be anything that's considered, especially in regulated industries. It could be something that the user did or something that they activated. Those can be defined by the admin, but it's something that allows them to. We're trying to keep that file size down and keep storage at a minimum, right? We all know storage can get heavy and can cause a lot of take up a lot of space. So we're trying to simplify it and again enhance it to continually promote it so customers who need it can use it. We're also seeing it also in call centers where or not call centers, but excuse me, help desks, where if a customer calls in for a service challenge and says, hey, this is causing the problem, and then in the call center rep can't duplicate it, or the admin can't duplicate it, they can at this time set a session recording and say, hey, I'm going to set a session recording for the rest of your shift. If it happens again, call me back and we'll go ahead and review it. So some of those things that people are leveraging session recording for today, but we continue to enhance it and bring service, value, continued value to it.
I think, Bill, we wanted that 10 years ago, didn't we? That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. The ability to trigger it on certain events, particularly events, like you said, Paul, that give rise to more potential security issues. For example, enabling or copying files between the session and the local device or something like that, being able to say, hey, this is a situation in which I want to initiate a recording or something along those lines.
Yep. Agreed. Great point there. I appreciate that.
So guys, now we get to more exciting stuff for people like us. The other stuff was pretty exciting, but now we're going to talk about things that have happened in the virtual app and desktop cloud service world. And the first one is something that's a very common topic around service continuity. So you guys have this thing called service continuity. making that generally available is what you're announcing here. Paul, you want to talk about the announcement itself, but before that, kind of just give an overview of what service continuity is.
Yeah, sure. And I'd like to get your guys' feedback, seeing that you guys have, excellent experience for many years on this. So we've introduced service continuity. We've been in tech preview for about, I think it's about 3 or 4 months now, where it provides like this enhanced reliability for users. And what happens is, on the perchance that a cloud service were to, not be available in any instance, what this does is it allows the user is notified that they may not be able to connect to a cloud service at the time, but it allows the resource in your Citrix workspace to continue working, through a Citrix gateway service. And it just gives the customers that much more assurance that if they're on cloud or they're leveraging cloud services, that they can continue to work no matter what the status is of any service at that time. But what do you guys think on that?
So Bill, can you break it down a little? I know we've covered it in podcasts, but I can't remember exactly what we covered and what we talked about from our previous conversations. Specifically, what is service continuity? What are the components of it?
As I recall, it basically works most specifically with the Workspace app. So essentially, the user connects to their environment, and the Workspace app essentially maintains a database or maintains a small file or sets of files that contain what they've connected to or what they can connect to. And then if the cloud service, the CVAD service is offline, or they have which it happens rarely, but if they lose a connection or something to the internet or out to the cloud, but they still have IP connectivity to their VDA, then that Workspace app can render the application icon. They click on it, it connects them directly to their VDA without having to have the Citrix virtual apps and desktop service brokering the connection. I think that's fundamentally how it works. And it's been out, like Paul said, a few months, and looks like they're just moving it to GA now.
Yeah, that's right on it.
It's almost like you keep that ICA file around longer and it's usable longer. And if you can't phone home to find out what the latest, greatest information is, you revert back to, and I'm using the ICA file. It's probably a bad example. Somebody's probably yelling at me right now. It's that content of the concept of it's cached so that you can get back to where you went before after checking to make sure that there isn't an availability to get updated information.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is there's got to be IP connect. You got to have network connectivity to the VDA for it to even work. But to your point, I don't know that Citrix would necessarily call it caching, but I mean, fundamentally, at the end of the day, it is storing the connection icons or the connection details that the user can then use when the cloud service can't broker it for them.
Awesome. Paul, did we miss anything?
Yep. No, I think you're right on it. And within the blog, we have some breakdown of another blog there that you can click on to get more information there too. That goes into a lot of details there.
Yeah. Okay.
I will say this has been, this discussion has come up more than once in projects where customers have said, what happens if, I lose my connection to Citrix Cloud, or Citrix Cloud goes offline, or we have an Azure hiccup, or what have you. So this conversation has come up more than once, and has in some ways kind of helped us bridge that gap between a concern and a real concern and an option to remedy that concern. If that makes sense.
So guys,
that's kind of go ahead. Sorry, Andy.
Would it be fair to say that's limited to the Workspace app, not coming through a browser, but the Workspace app?
That's my understanding at this point. Yes.
Yes, correct.
And you would have to not be relying on the cloud connector to get to that VDA. You'd be able to go directly to it in some way, shape, or form.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Automated configuration tool. Bill, from a consulting perspective, you want to just give us a high level what that is, and then we'll jump in and let Paul tell us what the changes are.
Yeah, we're actually using this right now with a project where the customer's going from an on-premises environment. I say on-premises, it's actually a full build in Azure. So, cloud connector, controllers, delivery controllers, storefront servers, et cetera, all in Azure, and they're moving that to Citrix Cloud, and they have a boatload of delivery groups and machine catalogs and lots of users assigned to those various delivery groups. In many cases, they're 80 groups, which is great, but in some cases, they've over time just added users like we tell them not to. Nevertheless, this tool allows us to essentially take the environment that is running on premises and shift it or move it or copy it. Copy it is a better term, to the cloud service, so that all those delivery groups are instantiated in there. We enable a connection back through to the VDA once it's reconfigured. All the users are assigned, all the applications are published, so you can move as much or as little as you need. And then it also apparently, if you watch the video that's in the blog, it also can apparently be used for cloud-to-cloud migrations, backups, lots of other capabilities of the tool, it looks like.
Yeah, that's right on it. And yeah, we initially called this the migration tool, and then one of our great guys that you guys are familiar with Dan Feller, he said, no, you know what? It's more than just a migration tool. This is something that you can use over and over again. Things like being able to sync between clouds, sync between, if you have a business continuity, separate sites. You're able to continually sync back and forth between those to make sure that everything is online, or everything is straight, and you have all the latest updates as you go. So this is not something that is just a one and done kind of thing. We're looking at it from the perspective of, this is something, a daily tool, a free tool, by the way, reminder for folks that are moving or considering CVAD service in the cloud, that this is a great tool. I helped a lot with the when we were going through the tech preview on this initially, and a lot of great customer feedback. A lot of customers said it really sped up the migration process for them when they were doing it. So in this instance, we're continuing to enhance those services. Again, being able to do all multi-sites, being able to do site activation. And then even we have even a warning code in there that if the customer has an older version, they can go ahead and be encouraged to update to the newest version of the tool. So we've done everything that we're doing. We're continuing to add. We're looking at other features and enhancements to add to this service. So again, we don't want it to be a one and done kind of tool. If you have any other interest, definitely recommend looking at the video. It's within the blog itself. It kind of gives we just put that video together, so it's fresh and should give you kind of a good idea of what it looks like, to how it operates.
And you guys call out these 3 bullets, which I don't know that we've covered here. Merging multiple sites, I think you did cover that one, but site activation as well as warning to upgrade to the latest version are enhancements. Mm-hmm.
Yes, those are some of the ones that we just recently added. Those are some of the the resources controls that you can as Bill was saying, is copy and paste or move from one location to another and streamline it, because a lot of the work that needs to be done, obviously, as you guys are well aware of, is that migration process is a long, it can get tedious, making sure, and then you want to try to avoid any human mistakes of making those moves over. So this kind of helps prevent any of those things from happening.
Right. Yeah, anytime you can automate something, right? So it may take more time in the beginning to set it up, but fail safe for later.
Exactly.
So next one, it says DAS, desktop as a service, workloads now available on Citrix virtual apps service. I think this is really taking a feature and putting it into a different edition of the product. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you're familiar with our Citrix virtual apps service, it's our apps only application as part of our Citrix virtual apps and desktops service, cloud service family, for customers that are looking to just do apps. Maybe they don't have a need for desktops. It's been a very popular service of ours. Customers who, even customers that are just starting out, they like the option of this service. And what we've done now is, and I think you probably talked to some of our other folks, we're adding this, what we're calling DAS workloads, or their desktops as a service, or their simplified workloads that can be quickly deployed. As we saw with the pandemic, going back to the pandemic, we're seeing that, there's an instance in some cases where, in some cases overnight, whether it's just weather, I'm in Florida, we get hurricanes, or other factors where you need to remote quickly get BDAs rolled out to employees to get them safely working at home or remotely. We give you this capability now through our quick deploy feature, which is part of our entire lineup now of Citrix virtual apps and desktops, the cloud services. What we're doing is we're giving you the ability to go in and quickly deploy as needed within Azure service. You can deploy apps and desktops. I'm sorry, in this case, it'd be apps. You can deploy apps quickly with a matter of 5 clicks to send out a simple one that your employees can access and then be able to continue to work no matter where they are remotely. So this is one of those services. You probably heard about it before, but we're just adding those DAS workloads through this quick deploy feature into this service as we move forward today. So it works through our Azure consumption funds. Customers can go about it 2 ways. If they want to leverage Citrix Azure, and I'll even back up 1 step further. We have the capability of being able to provide through this DAS environment, the ability to manage Azure in consumption for the customer on their behalf and make it easy for them. That's part of our Citrix. You guys probably talked about Citrix managed desktops or Citrix virtual apps and desktops standard now, as it's called for Azure. We have those capabilities where we can go ahead in and we'll help manage the Azure portion of the customer, and we just bill them for whatever services those are today. Now we're adding that to this service where we can actually, those customers can either prepay for Azure through Citrix, and it's kind of held in an account for them so that when they need it, they can burst into the cloud and use that service as they need to. Or also they can just sign up for billing services and for as little as $1. And then if they utilize that service, Citrix will just bill them for any consumption that's used. So it's somewhat of a convenience service. It's not something that's required for customers, but for those that want to leverage quick deployments into the cloud for anything like temporary workers, contractors, these temporary use cases that we see every day. Mergers and acquisitions, I get a lot of times people ask me, hey, we're bringing in another business, and I need to just give them some kind of simple access to give them access to an app or something specific. So we're giving that feature and that capability to admins that utilize this service, give them that feature. So sorry, that was a little long-winded, but I kind of wanted to set the level set on that so people understand.
And this question is for both you and Bill. How do people typically connect those tenants to their on-premises or cloud environments for the server side of a client-server relationship?
I'm not certain, but I think it's probably a VPN connection or something along those lines, or it's deployed in the customer's tenant. I think when Citrix is managing it, it's some form of a VPN connection within Azure.
Well, that's
yeah, it's a
SD-WAN. I mean, that sounds like a perfect use case.
Yeah,
for taking desktop as a service.
Absolutely,
and then
that's probably what it is.
together.
Actually, that's probably what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I haven't really dealt
they
with
can
this.
do that.
Yeah, I haven't really dealt with this particular offering, so I don't have a whole lot of detail.
Yeah, it's non-domain joined as well, so
okay.
you can do it that way through. And Citrix has access to make it capable that if you're bringing in, say, a seasonal worker, tax season, you need to bring in a couple of accountants. You can just by simply having an email address for the person to sign. Now you can just implement them into this quick deploy, give them a simple desktop that they can get their work done. And now I don't have to sit there and constantly edit and manage my Active Directory all the time, bring these people on and off. So it's more of a convenience thing for customer and more of a temporary, work seasonal kind of environment, I should say use case. But we're seeing customers are interested in it and looking at it.
Yeah, I'm very, and of course, our friends over at Microsoft have released Windows 365, which is their brokered version into a virtual desktop into Azure, similar type of service, but of course, missing a lot of the enterprise robustness that Citrix brings to the equation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right, next one is something I know Bill is a big fan of, and we got about 14 minutes left, but Workspace Environment Management, also known as WIM. A couple of things here. Paul, you want to talk through these 3 bullets, and then I'm sure Bill will have input.
Yeah. In the interest of time, I'll go quick. We're just continuing to add, enhancements to our WIM or Workspace Environment Management that a tool that's very popular with our customers that people really like, and they continually ask for, more support or more features to add to it to, continue to leverage it. We're doing event trigger support, so now you can go ahead and define triggers for session recording. You can through WEM determine what those triggers are in session recording, and what how to stop and start recordings. So those have been added. Being able to do MSI installers, we're basically giving admins the ability to give their users at an administrative level to install some Windows installer files. So if you want to go ahead and give a certain user the ability to be able to install files in there, WEM will give you the ability to provide those support for the privileges there. And then App Locker, if you're familiar with App Locker, what we're doing is we're just improving some of the the handling of the rule conflicts, and and try to just improve security administration in any kind of multi-session scenarios. But I'd be interested in hearing your feedback and your thoughts around it.
No, I think the first one is definitely something that kind of goes back to what we said earlier about session recording. About the rest of them are really nice to haves here as well. I'm curious, I assume this is both the on-premises version as well as the cloud version. Is that accurate? Paul?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And Bill,
Yeah.
that second
So
one
again,
is, I mean, we're an AppSense, now Avanti partner, and that second one has always been kind of a grasp, kind of a reach for the Citrix users that they needed, that gave them the ability to do those installs without giving full blanket admin rights. That is techie and as dorky as it sounds, that's the one that's got me most excited. The second one, MSI Installer Support.
Yeah, we typically try to include this on just about every project, WEM that is, and it's super simple where you're dealing with cloud. Because really all you have to do is deploy the VDA and then configure your policies. It's really simple.
Yeah, all I can say is stand by. We're having a lot more enhancements coming soon to WEM, and we're continuing to look at it and see how we can continue to enhance it and make it so that's something for customers to leverage today.
Well, and the most exciting thing, if I take off my tech guy hat for a minute, put on my business guy hat for a minute, the fact that Citrix it's still investing in some of these little things that don't necessarily change the income stream of the company that much. That's good to see.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to our engineering teams, because they are working super hard, and despite all that's going on in the world, they've kept their head down and they keep working hard. No matter where they are. They're doing a great job, and they, we're seeing every day them coming up with, you'll see them, tech previews and enhancements and things like that. So our guys are working really hard there. So like I said, this is just the start. You're going to see a lot more here as we continue out through the second half of the year. A lot of great features are going to be rolling out here.
Yeah. All right. So we're on the home stretch. We got a lot to cover. This next section talks about Citrix Virtual App and Desktop Standard for Azure. Basically the desktop as a service piece, gets Citrix Studio and enhanced monitoring. Paul, can you just hit these 3 bullets for us?
Yeah, I'll give you a really quick. This is our DAS service, and what we've done is rather than just have, again, we have the great thing about this service was it's simple to use, and it's quick to operate, and it's quick to deploy. We tried to take the simplicity angle of it with Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Standard, and make it easy for folks that just need to deploy, don't need detailed, or need the flexibility or the granular management that our CVAD full services supply. So what we've done is we've made that service simple and easy for customers who just want to do some basic deployments of apps and desktops. But with that, we're continuing to add enhancements to that service and make it even more value added. We're adding, as you guys are very familiar with, Citrix Studio, the Web Studio edition now that is basically rolled out on our Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop service family. We're bringing that into this service. It's not it's not the default service, but it's something that they can, if somebody that's using that service wants to move over and do some policies, install policies, or do a little bit more than what they do with a basic service. Now they have a basic version of Citrix Studio that lets them leverage that. Secondly, we're adding enhanced monitoring, which is basically adding Citrix Director to this service, including it. As you familiar with Citrix Director today, it offers a lot of great features and enhancements right within the monitoring tool. When this service first rolled out, we had some nice basic services that they could enhance and look at. But some of the folks coming back were saying, "Hey, we have help center or help support guys that need a little bit more information." So with this, we've rolled out Citrix Director to this service now, so they have that capability that they can go in and quickly monitor, services and how the health of services are with that service. It's not the full on what you would see with some of the others with our higher versions of Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop service, but it's giving that. And then again, prepared images. One of the best things about this service is we include a master image library. These are basic images that are updated regularly by Citrix that customers can either import their own, or they can build their own, or they can just grab and go with a templated image that they can just go and deploy instantly as they need to. So we're just continually growing this image library. We have everything from Linux to Windows multi-session. There's a lot of them out there. So we're making it available, and it's it just enhances the service even more, so that if customers want to use it and leverage it, they have all those features that they need to get it done.
Okay. Well, that takes us into the last section here, which is one of the most exciting things about the Citrix world, and one of the places where it brings probably the most value, and that's around analytics. This first section talks about performance analytics, and you've got 4 call outs here. You want to cover these 4 call outs, starting with the gateway service and connector visibility.
Yeah, sure. And for gateway service and connector, now we, with our Citrix performance analytics service, we're giving visibility into gateway service and the connector metrics. So now you have that much more visibility into how that's performing and any adjustments that need to be made. So that's one great add-on to this service to just bring more value to it. Then, of course, we're just adding additional enhancements to things like session responsiveness, being able to get visibility into things like bandwidth consumption, network latency, application delay, and session duration, so that you can kind of better assess where, if you have a user that's having some challenges or not having a good day, so to speak, we can go ahead and the admin can quickly look into it, or a help desk can look into see determine where, if they're having issues, where that might be. Because we know as Citrix folks, when the end user sees, all he sees is Citrix, he goes, my Citrix isn't working, and that we know that doesn't always, isn't always the case. So this is some way to quickly be able to look into those things. Again, also adding session experience enhancements, being able to get to that granular visibility into that session experience and see what those impacting factors are. Again, to make sure that we can troubleshoot quickly if they're having a bad day, or even if they're not, we can go ahead and look as we're doing our general maintenance to see if there's any way to improve the performance of those current services. And then lastly, what we're calling our noisy neighbor identifier. That's great for when you have users that are sharing resources and you're getting people with poor session experiences. You can look and see who's causing the poor session experience across there, and make adjustments there so that you can rectify that service quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love all of those. That last one specifically. Bill, do you have any comments on any of these?
No, it's great to see that we're including the gateway service and the connector metrics in here, but all of these I really like. I think customers will take advantage of these. This is all good stuff.
Yeah, we're feeling the same way too, and we are pushing enhancing our performance and our security analytics today to just continually grow the service and bring that more value add for customers that are considering analytics today. It's a great service, especially if you're looking to expand in the cloud or run you're expanding your businesses in general. Great option there. And then we're also looking in from the security analytics updates, being able to do with geofencing, giving user access with security analytics. This is basically being able to, if you have a user that's outside the geofence, that's trying to log in outside of what we're considering a geofenced area, it can actually send a notification to the user to say, are you intending to, are you trying to log in at this location, yes or no, and they could say yes or no, and they can the admin can choose to what kind of action that person does based on their response. So say if somebody was getting a notification that oh, I'm not supposed to be, I'm getting somebody's trying to access from a different part of the world, and the user says that's not me, then they can go ahead and automatically shut down that access and make it, just add that level of security there and prevent somebody from logging in inappropriately and maybe downloading confidential material. Access assurance dashboard, it's just it's a new tool for security that helps them visualize end user access so they can implement defensive strategies. So what it does is it actually shows where their users are logging in from, and it gives them the ability that they can implement defensive strategies based on where their users are coming in most. So it's kind of just like an overall look there at a dashboard, and kind of gives them view of where their users are, and make sure that they're getting proper security in the locations that they're supposed to. And then lastly, the session recording insights. We've talked a lot about session recording on this podcast here, but what we're doing is we're giving them the capability of it's recording, it's taking information about when there's recorded events that happen, and it gives the admin the ability to quickly locate and observe those security, if there are security incidents or there's something that you've set up. The admin can quickly look at those and see where they are, almost in real time. It just gives them a quicker way to respond, if those events are triggered.
So Bill and I both probably agree that Citrix has been a security play for a long time, just with the presentation protocol and the ability to prevent channels in that. But things like this just continues to take the security story further and further and further, so that it becomes more and more obvious that Citrix is a security step in the right direction, at least with tools to back that statement up.
Yeah, thanks for that. We really are focused on that. We know customers are focused on it. It may not be their top need, but it's always something that everybody always asks about at some certain point in the conversation, as you guys are well aware of in your customer conversations, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We hear it a lot. And I love this geofencing capability to be able to adapt the authentication and the notification to the situation. Like you said, your example, the user's logging in from somewhere they normally don't, then it can say, is this you? And if they say yes, maybe we can also make them authenticate using a different factor, like they get a text message or they get an authenticator pop to make sure that it's them. So there's all kinds of granularity you can get into here to make it more secure. It's good stuff.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, Paul, we are out of time, but I appreciate you joining. And as we pointed out somewhere through the middle of this, it's Citrix is the leader in this space. They have competition these days, but clearly still the leader, and not resting on their laurels for sure.
Yeah, and thanks so much, guys, in advance for to put this together and inviting us in to have these conversations. We'd love to continue the conversation, and if there's anything we could talk about in future future podcasts, please reach out, and we'll be glad to have them with you.
We will.
Yep, we will.
That's why we love you guys. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for the time, Paul and Bill. We'll do it again a different time. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks.
See you.